Last night would have been the Christmas dinner that I like to take my team and my staff out to celebrate the wonderful work they've put in over the year. It's because it's Christmas, it's an annual tradition. Obviously, because we've got a completely interesting landscape going on, pretty much it's next to impossible to actually organise a Christmas festivity gathering for a number of people. So what we did a DIY. We had a Christmas dinner that we decorated the office. We've got a big meeting room, got all that organised. And you're probably thinking to yourself, what on earth has this got to do with today's broadcast? Well, just bear with me for a moment or two and I'll sort of come to that reasoning. So as I'm sitting here, there's about 8 of us here. Not everybody could make it. 8 of us sit tucking into an incredibly enjoyable dinner. We're very fortunate in Leicester to have fantastic Indian restaurants here. So we managed to organise that. Got the office decorated, people dived in, make it a very festive occasion. I would say it's probably as good as an enjoyable an experience I've had in terms of a staff gathering, a team gathering here. And in that moment of reflection, I was thinking, you know, how fortunate I am after 26 years of being in business to have such a wonderful team of people that I can rely on and trust. How, you know, had my fingers burnt over the years, not just with team members, but with lots of different things in business, and thinking that actually that would make quite a pertinent theme to have on a broadcast conversation. And the reason being that is we're coming to the end of 2020. We've got lots of things happening on the landscape for next year. So we know 1st of January 2021, it's Brexit. We know it's been quite a turbulent bit of a washing machine year this year. But above all that, I know lots of clients, lots of businesses are still engaged in that planning process. Obviously, a bit of recuperation time, a bit of re-energizing time and all the rest of it. But effectively, when you're planning ahead, when you're thinking of forming new relationships with suppliers, with customers, maybe doing things differently, one critical factor that binds it all together, that determines the level of success, is trust. And trust in your business is absolutely key. And even if you're somebody who might be quite hard-bitten, somebody quite cynical and thinking, well, I don't trust anybody, believe it or not, we actually trust a lot more in our lives than we actually give ourselves credit for. So for my theme today is about trust in your business. It's more important than not just trust, but what is trust exactly? What is due diligence exactly? Let me just get the magic of a ticker tape coming on here. So it's about trust and due diligence. What are they? Why are they so important to our business success and our business prosperity and our business sustainability? And what can we do? How can we develop not just a trust in relationships that we have internally and externally, but how can we avoid fundamentally get our fingers burnt or trying to minimize that? How can we minimize the impact of making the wrong decisions? And due diligence has its parts to play. We have our own, obviously, our own fabric, our own business approach to these things here. And for me, it's a really important topic as we go into the end of 2020, as we're thinking ahead in terms of growing our businesses, keeping our businesses sustainable, about the role that trust plays, the role that due diligence plays in there, and their natural bedfellows. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Obviously, if you're catching up on replay, the old-fashioned hashtag replay, so I know you're there, add some comments. You may not necessarily agree with everything I'm saying, which is a fair point. Even sometimes I disagree afterwards, but no. So if you've got comments to make, chuck them in there. I'll pick them up as we go through. You may have your own version of what trust actually is, what trust represents. You may think, actually, Mahmood, that's a bit of a sort of a misnomer. But one thing I'll certainly know after 26 years and coming up to the anniversary in February, I have made some real schoolboy errors. I have had my fingers burnt a few times through not following my own advice. We've probably heard that quite often in businesses. I've actually mistrusted people, and perhaps I should have trusted them. I've trusted people, relationships, not just staff, but people that I'm doing business with, customers, suppliers. I'm sure it's been the other way around in addition as well. And, you know, I've lost money, I've lost confidence. I've actually, you know, been more embittered, shall we say, in terms of the attitude as a fleeting moment. Fast forward, you learn from your experiences, you learn to develop, you learn ways to try and minimize that. but you know, it still does catch up with you. So in the last couple of years, I've also been let down. I've also had my fingers burnt in terms of not following my own advice or trusting people, but actually not heeding that element of due diligence behind that, whether it's an enthusiasm and an eagerness to continue with something, whether it's being sucked in by the, you know, the outer showings of an individual or businesses. So what I'm going to do here is to say, I can't guarantee that you'll never lose out. I can't guarantee that your instincts will always be perfect. I can't guarantee that your instincts aren't perfect there as well. But it's just things to take on board that will help you actually move your business forward and try and minimize the level of pain that may befall you. So let's start off with, first of all, what is this idea of trust? If we take a working definition, a dictionary definition of what is meant by trust, it's a belief, albeit a firm one, in the reliability, truth or ability of someone or something. A lot of the things that we trust in our daily lives, we instinctively know. So, you know, if we're crossing the road and the roads are on, the lights are on red, we instinctively know, or certainly do, that traffic should slow down. So as we're crossing that road, we, you know, sometimes still keep looking left and right because we know at the back of our minds that a driver may be approaching those lights and may not necessarily slow down. Some of us will go blindly walking across. Some of the more cautious ones who exercise that element of risk will look left and right. And that's a bit of due diligence, albeit at a very sort of peripheral level. When we go and see a doctor, we trust that the doctor is qualified because obviously the surgery would have gone through their due diligence checks to check the doctor is registered, to check the doctor is competent, check the doctor has not been struck off. And therefore, you know, we rely on a third party to do the due diligence for us. Doesn't mean that the doctor may be incompetent, doesn't actually guarantee the quality of care that we get from that. But again, somebody along the chain has carried out some due diligence. When you go and seek a new supplier, whether it's a professional advisor, whether it's somebody providing materials for your manufacturing process, you know, there's some due diligence that we're going to carry out, or that we should carry out. We will assume, rightly or wrongly, that that individual is competent enough to deliver. The very badge, you know, there are things that we can carry out and check. You know, are they qualified? Do they have a badge of accreditation? It doesn't guarantee that we'll get a brilliant service, and it doesn't guarantee we'll get a bad service if somebody isn't duly qualified. When we buy materials, you know, we can check out the supplier. We can check out about how long they've been established, whether they're able to serve. But there are things that we can do more structurally to actually, again, sort of minimize things going wrong. And for me, it's such an integral part of our business and daily lives that without it, we cannot operate. We don't operate in vacuums. We don't operate, you know, as a standalone. And at some point, we have to make a leap of faith, ultimately, not an abrogation of faith, where we have to trust somebody, something, to actually carry out what we need them to do. Also, it extends to yourself. You've got to trust in your own ability. You've got to trust and believe in yourself to enable to do what you want to do in your business. If you don't have trust and confidence in yourself, then obviously, you know, it's going to be very difficult to convince customers. It's going to be very difficult to convince suppliers. It's going to be very difficult to convince anybody that they should invest their time, their energy and money with you as well. So trust is a very all-seeing, pervasive influence in your business. Now, I've had some very good experiences, I should add, in business. I've formed some brilliant relationships with people over the time. More recently this year, I've been very fortunate, through an exercise of checking out, due diligence, trusting, to form the best business relationship I've had in terms of partnering up. I'll just give her a mention now because it's come up to Christmas time. So Jo North, who I partner with on the Business Growth Club, that has been, out of the 26 years that I've been in business, the best, most productive and positive business partnership that I've had with anyone. I've had some really rubbish ones historically, but this has been excellent. So there are some good things that come out, you know, when you actually learn to trust. Now, for me, it's not about abandoning your common sense, what goes on between your ears. It's about making sure that if you move your business forward, deep breath, and then we can exercise some due diligence and minimize the risk of things going wrong. I'm going to go through some tips as well, by the way, to how you can actually establish and build up and strengthen the trust. Now, I mentioned due diligence at the beginning. So what's due diligence? Most often we come across due diligence when we think about businesses being purchased, mergers, acquisitions. You're coming up to retirement time, you want to sell your business, and your prospective buyer, as well as you, will be going through some due diligence exercises. So that's where we most commonly find it. So it probably seems quite unnatural, seems quite an unusual thing to talk about due diligence in the context of trust as well, when we're talking about normal business relationships. And remember, we're talking about whether it's taking on staff, whether it's finding new suppliers, whether it's forging new alliances, whether it's effectively going into new marketplaces, whether it's bringing somebody in to provide a bit of expertise. All those relationships to succeed, as much as your customers trusting you, require an element of trust. And without that, your business will not progress, and you're always going to be staying hidden under the duvet. You will not progress and move your business forward. Now, due diligence is really just trying to establish evidence, confirmation about a belief that you have in something. So usually when a business is being sold, the prospective buyer will want to do some due diligence, and typically that will be things like, what's the quality of your customer base? Do you have products that you're selling? Are they at the end of their natural life? When you talk about the finances in your business, how profitable you are, let me check the books, let me check the records. How reliable are your records? You've given me projections on how much your business is worth. Let's interrogate that. Let's have a look at the staff that we're buying potentially. Are there any issues there? How long have they been with you? Are there any cultural issues that are occurring? Any toxicity that I need to be aware of? And if I'm buying the brand, are there any legal restrictions? Are there any leases, licenses? So there will be very much a formalized process that we go through. We're checking the buyer. Do they actually have the money to back them up? So that's quite standard practice, or it certainly should be. It's a topic that we've covered, by the way, on previous broadcasts. So if you want to check out anything on the topics that I've just mentioned, please do check out the previous broadcasts. Let's crack on with what we're talking about here. So due diligence is about giving you some form of confirmation, some degree of comfort that what you see in front of you, you actually are willing to support that, and you've got some evidence to reinforce that. So for me, those are two natural bedfellows. Now, having said that trust is important, so what it is, why it's important? Well, we cannot do anything unless we trust. So if I look at my own businesses, there is no way that I would be able to have grown my businesses from a back bedroom of 26 odd years ago to where I am now with a good staff team, to having a great customer base, having a great client family, being able to deliver work to that client. And this isn't just an advert about me, I'm just using an analogy. I would not be able to continue and enjoy the things that I do in my business. I would not be able to go off and do broadcasts like today. I would not be able to have a positive business life and a personal life without trusting my team to deliver the work they do. Now, it doesn't mean that I just I don't do any due diligence. There are things that I do to check out their competence. There are things that I do to keep an eye on them, not micromanaging. So again, that's one element. If I'm going to expand my business, if I'm going to grow anything, just like you will be, then you've got to be able to trust the people that you're working with. Fundamentally, it's a truism. We do not actually know. So this is not a guarantee. This is not me saying, if you listen to what I'm saying, if you follow the instructions, if you follow the tips, I can guarantee you'll have a risk-free, blameless business life. Unfortunately, I cannot do that. The whole thing about business and life in general is that nobody has any idea what's going to happen tomorrow. There are things we can do to minimize risk. There are things that we can do to reduce the likelihood of something going wrong, but there are no guarantees for anything. There are things that we can do to mitigate. There are things we can do to reduce. There are things that we can do to remove and reduce the emotional impact, the financial consequences, but there's no such thing as guarantees. Sometimes we can do all those things. We can do all the due diligence. We can do all the checks. We make that decision, We use all our competence, we bring things to the fore, and it still can go wrong. You know, there are factors outside of our control. Sometimes it may not just land correctly, but you know, this is all about risk management here, because what's the option? The option is just to give up and not bother doing anything. Now, the first thing I would suggest is, and I would draw a bit of an analogy here, so you get two for the price of one here, is it's the same when you look about getting paid on time by customers. Now, typically, if your business is granting facilities to somebody, so you've got a business relationship that's going, you know that you can't develop that business relationship unless you give credit to your potential customer. It's the same with trust. If you're looking to work with an expert, if you're looking to work with a supplier, if you're looking to work with a business partner, if you're looking to develop, move into a different place and you need somebody to help you, you've got to make sure that before you sign anything, before you forge any business relationship, that, you know, you've got to check them out. There's got to be some background, there's got to be some validation, and you've got to check that the person, the business relationship you're trying to develop is worthwhile. Just as much, if you grant credit facilities, you need to check somebody's credit worthiness. You can do things like get credit reports. You can do things like checking out their trading history. You can get some reports, check them out on Companies House. You can ask questions. The things you can do just is as preparatory background. Do the same with anyone you're going to form a business relationship with. So I don't mean actually stalk them. I don't mean actually, you know, go to their house and see what's going on, but check the reality of what's going on. You can ask if there are businesses they've worked with before. You can check out their social media profile. I think we live in such a world now that it's relatively easy-ish to check the validity and the reality of what somebody's actually saying. So before we even, you know, do anything of concrete here, you can check them out. Now, I would suggest, as a preparatory thing, what you could ask yourself at the beginning, and this is probably the bit that a lot of people don't necessarily do, is to ask yourself, what is the purpose? What am I trying to get out? What are my objectives? If I know what my objectives are, I know what my criteria are, then it's easier to check out whether that person is fit for purpose, whether that person is the person I want to develop a business relationship with. It could be a one-off transaction, it could be a series of transactions, but what is it you're looking for? How much, some idea of what you're looking for, and then you can formulate some form of checklist, some form of, yep, that's fine. I've got a bit more comfort now in terms of what's going on. Please do not trust anybody at face value. So lots of people are very positive, very ebullient, very sort of outgoing, exude confidence. That in itself doesn't actually guarantee competence. That in itself doesn't guarantee quality. And what you have to bear in mind is, and I heard this on the radio the other day, is that, for example, some people who may not be as outgoing, some people who may not be sort of gung-ho, some people who may not be as ebullient, that's actually in the minority. There's more people in what I call the shyness arena than there are people who are those, you know, let's go get them. So do not take anything at face value. Do some background checking. Obviously, you don't need to hire a private investigator, but you need to actually do some checking, do some due diligence on that individual or that business itself. For myself, I've had experience when people have approached me offering business services. I would typically go onto Companies House. I would check to see how long the business has been established. I would then check out the individuals. And you know, I don't want to rely on just saying, oh, I think I like the shape of what you're doing. You can do some things, and that tells me actually this person is talking about, you know, a big what they're bringing to the table, but actually they've only been going a few weeks, a few months there as well. So it doesn't mean they don't have the talent, but they may not necessarily be, shall we say, be as truthful, not because they're being fraudulent. And I've caught a number of people out that way, but it also is a question that I can ask, and it helps me formulate that conversation. I think going into it as well, you need to actually establish some parity of a quality of discussion as well. So do not take anything at face value. Check it out to some extent to give yourself some degree of comfort. Now, just as much a manufacturer that might be looking for a new supplier to supply a product, to supply materials, to supply some labor, what they might do typically is not to give the whole contract out immediately. They might actually want to test the water first of all. So as much that when I give somebody, say, credit facilities, I might say, typically, I will allow you a credit facility of X, and your terms of business are paying within 7 days, 14, 21, 28. Now, it's the same with a potential business relationship here. You may start off by just trying one little thing. Once you've got, you're happy on the face value, you know what you want out of that delivery, out of that relationship. Okay, and then as the relationship strengthens, as they come back and they prove competence and ability, and you finding that your life has been relieved, it's been lifted, you know, you get some positive payback, then you may decide to extend and deepen that relationship. In the same situation with somebody's being given credit facilities, you know, if they honor that credit term correctly and they're looking for more credit, it may make you think, actually, yeah, okay, they've been conducting themselves quite well, and therefore I'm more comfortable with extending that parameter. It's the same mindset, by the way, that goes when you're actually looking to try and get some efficiencies in your business, when you're trying to relieve the burden, when you think, actually, I need an extra resource. You have to think about what your business needs. You have to think about the investment that you might have to make. And then what you might find is, if somebody starts off with a little bit of a task, is that actually the payoff is really positive, and therefore you can extend the involvement with that individual. So little bit and build it up. Extend your trust just as much as you would extend an investment with something or credit facilities. Now, the third and the fourth aspects are the ones that I find sometimes in our busy lives sometimes gets forgotten, sometimes gets put on the back burner, and it's not a character flaw, but it's something that may be problematic for a number of individuals. Now, what am I referring to? You've got to keep an eye on things. So having defined what you're wanting out of that business relationship, now whether it's with your team, whether it's an external supplier, having defined what you want, you then have a formal relationship, money changes hands, transactions occurring. You need to make sure you monitor and keep an eye on things. So effectively, if you have an expectation of things being delivered by a certain time, if you have an expectation that certain things are going to be carried out, if you have an expectation that things are going to be delivered here, if they're not, if you don't have that service level expectation and they're not, that is the time you've got to do something. So as much, if I draw the same analogy, that you've given a customer 14 days to settle their account, you've invoiced them, day 15 arrives. Well, day 15 is not a question of saying, oh, I'll wait till the next day, I'll wait till the next week, you know, they're busy. You've either given 14 days or you've not given 14 days. So on day 14, technically speaking, that money should be in your account. If it's not, you need to do something. It doesn't mean you go there with a sledgehammer. It doesn't mean you go around there with a baseball bat, even though that might be quite tempting. It means you have to act. And that action could be a reminder letter, if that's part of your protocol. It could be picking up the phone. It could be sending an email. A whole number of factors that you might do, but you've actually got to do something on day 14, brackets day 15 at worst. It's the same when somebody doesn't deliver, even if it's a tiny little aspect here, you need to react. Now, it could be good reasons why it's not happened. It could be good reasons why that delivery is not being made. It could be good reasons why that piece of work has not been delivered. It could be good reasons why the materials haven't arrived on time, they've not been the right quality. Now, ultimately, it shouldn't be down to you to have to do the action, but that's the nature of the beast. You will have to do something. And you need to, what I call, confront the situation. Now, confrontation, by the way, does not mean aggression. Confrontation does not mean you've got to get angry. Confrontation doesn't mean you say that suddenly it's World War III. Excuse that very dramatic analogy, but it means you can't be passive. Because what happens with human psychology and human behavior, if you leave it at a tiny little bit, what it happens is it becomes easy to neglect it the next time. And before you know it, because you haven't built up that culture of dealing with something straight away, because you built up that relationship of doing something straight away, when you do come to deal with it eventually, what tends to happen is that your reaction to dealing with it when it happens again is disproportionate to the event itself. So when your expectations are not met, then you need to react and have that conversation. Now, if it's not a natural part of your DNA, I would not see that as a confrontation in terms of an argument. I would just see that as a conversation that you're having with somebody to elicit what's going on and see if it can be put right there as well. You need to have an understanding. Now, ideally, we live in a world where if it's not delivered on day 14, then whoever you're working with says, oh, by the way, it's not going to happen for whatever reason. It's for you to elicit whether you're comfortable with the responses. But either way, you've got to deal with the situation. Keep an eye on things. Avoidance does not help anybody. Thinking it will go away, doing that, covering your eyes, going la, 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 hiding under the duvet is absolutely no good for anybody. Business owners, as a business, you need to make sure you develop that confidence, you develop that ability to have that discourse with someone. And the same goes with your team. So with my wonderful staff team, it doesn't mean I say they're brilliant, which they are, and therefore I'm just going to leave them to it. I have to monitor the situation. I have to review the work that's going on. Obviously, I've got people in my team that also help with that. I have to review the work. And if things aren't quite the standard that we would like, then it's down to me to have that discourse, to have that conversation, not to make somebody feel bad, but to identify where the issues are, put them right, and make sure we can fix them and move on. So it's very part of a learning process. If you don't feel comfortable, if you've got a staff team that somebody does something wrong, so it could be turning up late by 5 minutes, it could be the quality of the work they're delivering. If you don't feel comfortable having those conversations, I can promise you've got a nightmare time ahead of you. If it's important and it's part of your processes, it's what you've communicated, then if it doesn't happen, deal with it. If you don't want to deal with it, then you've got to ask yourself, is it that important to you? And that's a real difficult thing, because we as human beings, it's not natural for us to want to have those conversations. But again, don't look at it as a negative. Don't look at it as, oh my God, I'm really building myself. The anxiety that builds up because you don't want to have that conversation, it can be disproportionate. Now, for me, I don't have an issue having conversations with anybody about anything that's going to be seen by others as quite problematic. It's not because I'm somebody who likes to confront. I'm very gentle, very nice, but effectively, I just found through bitter experience, if you leave it and you don't deal with it, then problems happen. And I would hold my hands up. It's happened to me where things like extending credit facilities to a customer, for whatever reason, a bit of my brain just went on walkabout. I didn't follow it. I didn't confront it directly in line with systems and everything else, and it all went wrong. And one lost money. But that's life. Ultimate responsibility is the customer not paying, but I play a part in that. And that's just the same, by the way. It does happen. It's a part of the human condition, but we're going to try and make it sure we're consistent. Consistency is always wonderful. As we said, if things go wrong, act on it. Now, the last thing I would suggest that's going to blend to this is systemization. So have systems and have processes. So in the context of credit control, you may have systems that says when somebody wants credit, we do the due diligence checks. We put them on the system, we do this, we send out invoices on time, we remind them, we chase it up. We've got maybe 3 stages of gently reminding what's going on, a little bit more assertive, and then it's the nuclear option that might be the last one. Tailor it to whatever your circumstances are. It's the same in terms of when you do new suppliers. Anyone who's worked with local authorities or with charities or government organisations or large corporates, of which I have, is they will have a procurement process that goes through. So if you want to get a contract with a major company, you will have to go through certain steps, a certain procurement process. It's more long-winded, it seems. It takes time. But again, there are set procedures here because big companies have what they call established systems. Doesn't mean they always get them right, by the way. Doesn't mean they don't get bypassed. Doesn't mean there's dysfunctionality there, but they will have established systems to go through. Systemize your business where you can. So you've got a set procedure to follow and follow it. Now, there will be times when human judgment, your commercial judgment comes to the fore, and that overrides your systems. But those should be very rare occurrences. They should not be the thing that happens as a matter of course. So let's recap. Check out. Little and then build up. Make sure you do something to reinforce the judgment that you're making with somebody. Make sure you've got some form of monitoring. Make sure you act when things aren't going quite well. If you're forming an allegiance, a business partnership, whatever, if you're not comfortable having conversations when things are going rocky and when things are going tough, then I would suggest you just don't bother at all. Act on your own. Same with the supplier. We're all neutral suppliers. Doesn't matter what they do, what we do. We're all part of a cog. We're all part of a big machine helping our customers. Our suppliers are helping us. We're all connected here, and we can do it positively. We can do it with smiles, but ultimately we're not running a hobby here. It's a business that we're doing. Systemize where you can. Have processes and procedures. Folks, listen, that's pretty much what I would say. So trust is integral. You cannot do anything in your business life without trusting. However, we're not talking about blind faith. We're talking about a leap of faith. We're not talking about an abrogation of faith. So can you imagine that situation where you're not a swimmer, you dive into the deep end of a swimming pool and hope you can swim? Well, that ain't going to happen. You're going to drown. So therefore, in this situation, at some point, we're going to have to do that and say, yes, we trust this relationship. Let's see how it goes. But if you've done some of the preparatory, if you've done some of the due diligence, you will find that the likelihood of things going wrong and getting your fingers burnt will be far less. That's enough for me, folks, for this week. I look forward to you now. I believe next week is the 26th, so I might sneak off and do a broadcast. If for any reason I don't emerge next week, you'll see me on my broadcast with my partner, Dr. Joe North, on the Business Growth Club on Tuesday. We shall see how Christmas turns out. So I shall either be here on Boxing Day or the day after. But failing that, if you're resting, have a superb Christmas. It's still the 19th, so there's bags of time to go. But failing that, folks, have a brilliant time. I'll see you guys in the next